Overthinking is like a storm that never ends. Thoughts circling endlessly, each one louder than the last, pulling you deeper into doubt and hesitation. It steals clarity, kills action, and leaves you stuck in the same place no matter how hard you try to think your way out. But centuries ago, a man who lived by the sword and the mind discovered a way to silence this storm. Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated samurai, faced countless battles, not only on the battlefield but also within himself. And through his writings especially, he left behind strategies that were not just for combat but for life, for mastering the mind, for overcoming fear, and for breaking free from the prison of overthinking. His genius wasn't only in how he fought with the blade, but in how he thought with clarity, purpose, and discipline. Today we will step into his wisdom, not as warriors on a battlefield, but as individuals facing the constant battles of the modern mind. Because Musashi's way is not just about strategy, it's about freedom. Freedom from the noise, freedom from the doubts, freedom from the hesitation that keeps you from living fully. And if you're ready, let's begin this journey into his timeless principles that can still transform the way you think, decide, and live. 1. Perceive what cannot be seen. Overthinking begins not with the world outside but with the hidden battles inside you. Musashi's first lesson, perceive what cannot be seen, is not about developing some supernatural vision. It is about courageously turning your gaze inward where most people refuse to look. We live in a culture that rewards distraction, where endless scrolling, entertainment, and noise serve as shields against facing what truly bothers us. But the samurai knew that until you confront what is invisible to the eye, your fears, your insecurities, your hidden desires, you will always be trapped in mental chaos. Overthinking is rarely about the problem in front of you. It is about the fear beneath it. You worry about failing an exam, but deep down the real fear is that you are not smart enough. You worry about making a decision at work, but underneath lies the fear of being judged as inadequate. These hidden fears are like shadows. You cannot fight them if you do not see them. Musashi's wisdom reminds us the battle is not with the world, but with the unseen corners of your own mind. Think about how often you avoid silence. Many people cannot sit alone in a quiet room without reaching for their phones, turning on music, or distracting themselves with meaningless tasks. Why? Because silence reveals what we do not want to face. The mind, when left without noise, begins to speak truths we have buried. It tells us where we feel weak, where we feel lost, where we are afraid of not being enough. Most overthinking comes from running away from these truths. Instead of sitting with discomfort, we try to control every possible outcome in our head, believing that if we think hard enough, we can avoid fear. But fear doesn't go away with more thought. It grows stronger. Musashi's strategy invites us to do the opposite. Stop running from the unseen. Instead, face it directly. When you bring hidden fears into the light, they lose their power over you. Philosophers throughout time have echoed this lesson. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or ignore, which secretly control our lives until we confront them. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that it is not external events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Both ideas point to the same truth Musashi lived by. Clarity begins when you perceive what is hidden, when you name the fear behind the fog. This is not easy because it demands honesty. To admit, for example, that your perfectionism is not a noble standard, but a mask for insecurity, or that your constant worrying is not being prepared but a lack of trust in your own strength. Yet once you admit these truths, the noise of overthinking begins to quiet. Let's bring this into practical life. Imagine you are hesitating to apply for a job, thinking of every reason why you might not get it. On the surface, you tell yourself, I just need more time to prepare. But if you ask, what fear is driving this hesitation? You might uncover something deeper. I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid people will see I'm not good enough. Once you identify this, you can confront it directly. You can remind yourself that rejection does not define your worth. It is simply a step toward growth. In this way, the invisible fear loses its grip and action becomes possible. Overthinking dissolves when the hidden truth is faced. This is also why Musashi believed in constant training. By testing himself daily in the face of discomfort, he forced the unseen into the open. Every duel, every challenge revealed his own weaknesses, which he then worked to transform. You may not fight with swords, but life gives you battles of a different kind. Projects, conversations, relationships, opportunities that push you into discomfort. The question is, will you avoid them or will you use them as mirrors to reveal what you need to see within yourself? Each moment of hesitation is not just indecision. It is an invitation to uncover the unseen fear behind it. The truth is, most people never do this work. They live on the surface fighting shadows without ever realizing the shadows are their own. And so they repeat the same patterns year after year, overthinking, doubting, and hesitating. But those who follow Musashi's path choose courage over avoidance. They sit in silence. They journal their fears. They ask difficult questions.
What am I really afraid of here?
What story am I telling myself that is not true? What pain am I avoiding by staying stuck in thought? These questions cut through the fog like a blade. When you begin to perceive what cannot be seen, you step into a different kind of strength. You stop being controlled by fears you pretend do not exist. You stop letting insecurities dictate your choices. And slowly you realize that overthinking has less and less room to survive in your mind, because the storm loses power when the shadows are named. Musashi understood this. His victories were not just over opponents, but over the invisible enemies within. And if you have the courage to do the same, you will discover that clarity, confidence, and freedom are not things you chase. They are things you uncover within yourself. So ask yourself, what am I refusing to see? What fear or insecurity have I hidden so deeply that it now controls my thoughts from the shadows? The moment you dare to answer honestly is the moment you begin to escape the prison of overthinking. 2. There is more than one path to the top of the mountain. One of the greatest traps of overthinking is the belief that there is only one correct way forward, one perfect decision, one flawless path to success. This mindset turns every choice into a life or death battle in your head. You delay taking action because you're terrified of picking the wrong option. You replay scenarios endlessly, trying to calculate the future with precision, as if life were a chessboard where every move could be predicted. But life is not a single straight road. It is a mountain with countless trails leading to the top. Musashi's reminder there is more than one path to the top of the mountain is a liberation from perfectionism and a cure for the paralysis of overthinking. It tells us that progress is rarely about choosing the one perfect way. It is about choosing a way, committing to it, and allowing flexibility when the path changes. Think about the people who get stuck in analysis paralysis. They want to start a business, but they can't decide on the perfect niche. They want to get healthier, but they spend months researching the best diet or exercise plan instead of simply moving their body. They want to learn a new skill, but they keep hesitating between courses, apps, or teachers. In the end, they do nothing. The illusion of one perfect path becomes their cage. Musashi warns us against this illusion. If you want to reach the top of the mountain, what matters is climbing, not agonizing over which trail is slightly smoother. This teaching also reminds us that the obsession with perfection is rooted in fear. When you think there's only one right way, you are really saying, I am too afraid of making a mistake, so I must calculate endlessly before I move. But the irony is that overthinking itself becomes the mistake. Every moment spent debating instead of acting is a lost opportunity to grow, to learn, to adapt. The Stoics taught a similar truth. Epictetus reminded us that we cannot control outcomes, only actions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste the rest of your life speculating about others. Spend it in pursuit of the good." Both ideas echo Musashi's principle. Stop wasting energy searching for a perfect path. Choose a direction and walk it with discipline. Real life shows us this truth every day. How many people succeed by following unconventional paths? Someone drops out of school but builds a thriving company. Another person takes a detour in their career, seemingly unrelated to their goal. Yet the skills learned along the way become the key to their success later. The common thread is not that they found the path. It's that they kept moving, adjusting and climbing despite uncertainty. Overthinking would have told them to wait, to analyze forever. Musashi's wisdom gave them permission to act, knowing that the summit can be reached from many directions. Perfectionism often disguises itself as ambition. You tell yourself, I just want the best outcome. I want to do things right. But underneath lies insecurity, the fear of failing, of looking foolish, of wasting effort. The truth is, failure is not the end. It is one of the paths upward. You may stumble on a rocky trail, but that stumble teaches you balance. You may take a longer route, but that route teaches you endurance. Every path shapes you in ways the perfect imagined path never could. Musashi's genius strategy was not in avoiding mistakes, but in using every step, every battle, every misstep as fuel for mastery. So how do you apply this today? Start by challenging the idea that your next step has to be flawless. If you are choosing between two jobs, ask yourself not which one is perfect, but which one will I commit to fully and grow from? If you are deciding on a project, don't waste months perfecting the plan. Choose a version. Start and adjust along the way. Flexibility is strength. Rigidity is weakness. Musashi knew that a warrior who clings only to one technique will eventually be defeated. The adaptable warrior, the one who sees many paths, cannot be cornered. This perspective doesn't just calm overthinking, it transforms it. Suddenly, the weight of having to be perfect lifts from your shoulders. You realize that the mountain doesn't care which path you take. It only cares that you climb. Overthinking dies when you accept that mistakes are part of the climb, not proof you are unworthy of it. Life opens when you trust yourself to adapt no matter which trail you choose. So ask yourself, where in your life are you stuck waiting for the perfect option? What dream, goal, or decision are you delaying because you believe there is only one correct way? And more importantly, what would change if you accepted that there are many paths and the only mistake is refusing to walk any of them? 3. Do nothing that is of no use. One of Musashi's most profound lessons is brutally simple. Do nothing that is of no use. At first it sounds almost obvious, like common sense, but when you look at your own life honestly, you realize how much of your time, energy, and attention are consumed by things that bring no real value. Overthinking thrives in this wasted space. When your mind is cluttered with useless habits, distractions, and shallow pursuits, it multiplies noise. It keeps you trapped in endless loops of thought because your energy is scattered. Musashi's strategy is a call for ruthless clarity. Remove the unnecessary and the mind finds stillness. Think about how much of daily life is filled with what is useless. Hours lost on social media, scrolling not because you care but because you are avoiding silence. Arguments repeated in your head, rehearsing conversations that will never happen. Worrying about other people's opinions even though their judgment adds nothing to your growth. These are the modern equivalents of carrying stones up a mountain only to drop them halfway. They exhaust you, yet they don't move you closer to the summit. The human brain is powerful, but when it is fed with trivialities, it spins endlessly. Overthinking is often not the mind's fault. It is simply overfed with junk. Musashi was a swordsman who lived with discipline. Every move he made had a purpose. Every strike, every step, every word carried intention. In battle, doing something of no use could mean death. For him, clarity was survival. For us, clarity is freedom. When you eliminate the unnecessary from your daily life, your mind gains space to focus on what matters. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The Stoics, like Musashi, understood that wasted energy is the root of a restless mind. The less you waste, the less you overthink. Consider this in practical terms. You sit down to work, but before beginning you check your phone. 10 minutes become 30. You start a task, but then you open a new tab, then another. You plan your week, but instead of starting, you research endlessly for the best productivity system. Hours pass and nothing meaningful gets done. Later you wonder why you feel anxious, why your head feels heavy, why you're stuck in cycles of thought. It's because your energy has been drained by things of no use. When you finally face what matters, you're already too tired to focus. Musashi's advice is the antidote. Stop feeding your overthinking with useless actions. The key here is not just about cutting distractions. It is about living with intention. Ask yourself, why am I doing this right now? Is it moving me toward my purpose or is it feeding my avoidance? When you watch another video, scroll another feed, or replay another conversation in your mind, are you moving forward or standing still? Overthinking thrives when you stand still because the mind needs something to chew on, and when it has nothing purposeful, it invents problems. But when you live with focus, your mind has no room for endless chatter. Purpose pushes out noise. This principle is as much about the inner world as the outer. Doing nothing of no use means refusing to entertain thoughts that serve no purpose. Self-pity, jealousy, resentment. These are useless thoughts. They do not solve problems. They poison the mind. A warrior cannot afford to rehearse defeat in his head. Why should you? When you catch yourself spiraling, ask, is this thought useful? If not, drop it. Imagine carrying a backpack up a steep hill. Every useless thought is like a rock added inside. Eventually, the weight is unbearable. Musashi tells you, throw out the rocks. Travel light. There is also an elegance to this lesson. Do nothing that is of no use. Doesn't mean strip life of joy. It means strip life of waste. A meaningful conversation is useful. A walk in nature is useful. Rest that renews you is useful.
What is not useful is excess.
The endless compulsive unconscious habits that drain rather than replenish. Overthinking is fueled not by too little activity, but by too much useless activity. Simplify and suddenly your mind quiets. So how do you begin to live this? Start small. Look at one part of your day. Ask yourself, what am I doing that adds nothing? Maybe it's the 2 hours lost to mindless scrolling. Maybe it's gossip that leaves you drained. Maybe it's the constant self-doubt rehearsed in your head. Cut one thing out. Replace it with something purposeful, a book, a workout, a meaningful task. Notice how your mind feels lighter, clearer, calmer. Musashi wasn't teaching minimalism as a lifestyle trend. He was teaching mental clarity as a survival strategy. For him, useless actions in combat could cost his life. For you, they cost your peace, your focus, your potential. Overthinking will never disappear if you keep feeding it with useless distractions and wasted energy. But the moment you commit to Musashi's rule, you begin to cut the noise. Each choice to do only what is useful is a strike against overthinking. Slowly, your life becomes sharper, your mind more disciplined, your focus stronger. The prison of overthinking isn't broken with one big decision. It's broken with 1,000 small refusals to waste yourself on what doesn't matter. So ask yourself right now, what am I doing that is of no use? What thought, habit, or distraction is draining me while giving nothing back? And what would my life feel like if I had the courage to let it go? The clarity you are searching for doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from stripping away what is useless until only the essential remains. 4. Today's victory over yourself of yesterday. Overthinking thrives when you compare yourself to others. When your eyes are constantly turned outward, measuring your worth against the achievements, possessions, or appearances of those around you. Musashi, however, offers a radically different standard. Today's victory over yourself of yesterday. The true battle, he reminds us, is not against the world, but against the weaker version of who you were yesterday. This is not just strategy. It is liberation, because once you stop comparing yourself to others and focus instead on daily self-mastery, you give overthinking no ground to stand on. Think about how comparison fuels mental noise. You see someone your age succeed in business and immediately your mind begins the spiral. Am I behind? Did I make the wrong choices? Should I have done what they did? Hours are lost replaying imagined scenarios of how life could have gone differently, but Musashi would tell you that person's path is irrelevant to your climb. The only path that matters is yours. Overthinking comes from trying to solve other people's puzzles instead of your own. When you bring the focus back to your own improvement, measured only against yesterday's self, you cut through the fog of comparison like a blade. The wisdom here is both practical and deeply psychological. Every time you compare yourself to others, you are battling shadows you cannot control. You do not control their opportunities, their circumstances, their timing, but you do control your actions today. You control whether you rise a little earlier, whether you train your body, whether you feed your mind with better thoughts, whether you take one small step forward in your craft. Musashi's teaching is a reminder that self-mastery comes not from sudden leaps, but from consistent daily victories, small quiet wins that accumulate until they form unshakable strength. The Stoics understood this too. Marcus Aurelius urged himself in his meditations, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Notice how this reflects Musashi's principle. The question is never, am I better than others, but am I better than who I was yesterday? Seneca wrote that the greatest progress comes not in comparing ourselves to others, but in freeing ourselves from yesterday's weaknesses. This shift of focus from external comparisons to internal progress is one of the most powerful antidotes to overthinking. Consider how this applies in daily life. Maybe yesterday you wasted hours scrolling on your phone. If today you waste a little less, that is victory. Maybe yesterday you skipped your workout. If today you move your body, that is victory. Maybe yesterday you spoke harshly to someone. If today you show patience, that is victory. These small triumphs may seem insignificant, but they add up to transformation. Overthinking often convinces you that unless you make massive, perfect changes, nothing counts. But Musashi's wisdom cuts through this illusion. The summit of the mountain is reached one step at a time, not by leaping over it. This mindset also redefines as failure. If the battle is against yesterday's self, then even mistakes become fuel for progress. A failure today simply becomes the lesson that guides tomorrow's victory. Instead of overthinking the failure endlessly, you absorb it, adapt, and move forward. Musashi himself lost jewels early in his life, but instead of drowning in regret, he studied them, refined his technique, and returned stronger. The warrior's mind knows that defeat is temporary, but growth is permanent if you keep showing up. The power of this principle lies in its clarity. Overthinking asks 1,000 questions. Am I good enough? Will I ever succeed? What if I fail? What if others laugh at me? Musashi replaces all of this with one simple standard. Am I better than I was yesterday? That is the only question that matters. If the answer is yes, even slightly, then you are on the path. If the answer is no, then you know where to focus tomorrow. The mind no longer needs to drown in endless comparisons or imagined futures. It has a clear, direct target. Daily self-mastery. Imagine applying this to something as ordinary as learning a skill. Let's say you want to learn a language. Overthinking might convince you it's too hard. Others are already fluent. I'll never be good enough. But Musashi's way would ask, do you know one more word today than you did yesterday? Did you practice 5 minutes more than before? That is victory. Or take fitness. Instead of obsessing over others' progress or your future ideal body, you ask, am I stronger, more disciplined, more resilient than I was yesterday? That reframing keeps the mind anchored in progress, not paralysis. When you adopt this mindset, overthinking loses its grip, because overthinking thrives in vague, endless comparisons. But when your standard is concrete, your own yesterday, there is nothing abstract to debate. You either improved or you didn't. If you did, you celebrate and continue. If you didn't, you adjust and try again tomorrow. The simplicity is powerful. Musashi knew that warriors cannot afford confusion in the heat of battle. Their standard must be immediate and clear. For us in the battles of everyday life, the same applies. So the challenge is this. Can you shift your focus from others to yourself? From tomorrow's fears to today's effort? Can you make the standard of success not perfection, not comparison, but progress over who you were yesterday? This is how you silence the storm of overthinking, because the mind no longer needs to juggle infinite possibilities. It needs only to answer one question. Did I win against my yesterday? Ask yourself now, in what area of your life can you claim victory over yesterday? And if you cannot, what small step today would earn that victory tomorrow? Remember, Musashi's genius was not in perfection, but in discipline. His victories were not about conquering the world, but about conquering himself day after day, yesterday after yesterday. 5. There is timing in everything. Overthinking often feels like trying to force open a door before it is ready to be unlocked. You push, you strain, you exhaust yourself with worry. Yet the door will not move. Why? Because there is timing in everything. Musashi understood this truth deeply, not only in combat but in life. In battle, a strike too early or too late meant defeat. The warrior had to sense the rhythm to act at the exact moment when the opportunity was ripe. And outside the battlefield, this wisdom remains just as vital. Our modern struggles with anxiety and overthinking come in part from our inability to trust timing. We want everything now. We demand answers before they are ready to appear. And so instead of flowing with life's rhythm, we resist it, creating tension, impatience, and mental noise. Think about how impatience feeds overthinking. You send a message and the reply doesn't come fast enough. Within minutes, your mind begins spinning. Did I say the wrong thing? Are they ignoring me?
Did I offend them?
Hours later, the message arrives. Simple and innocent, but by then your energy has already been drained by needless speculation. Or consider your career. You plant seeds, studying, working hard, trying to prove yourself. But when results don't appear immediately, you begin to spiral. Am I failing? Should I change direction? Is this all a waste of time? The mind obsesses over the lack of instant results, blind to the truth that growth takes its own pace just as a tree does not bloom the day after it is planted. Musashi's lesson reminds us that clarity comes not from forcing outcomes, but from respecting timing. Just as a warrior must wait for the opponent's opening, so must we learn to wait for life's openings. This doesn't mean passive waiting. Musashi did not stand idle in battle, nor should we in life. It means moving with patience, practicing discipline, and acting decisively when the moment comes. Impatience is wasted energy. Overthinking is the attempt to control time itself. Wisdom is surrendering to rhythm while preparing yourself so that when the time arrives, you are ready. The Stoics carried a similar truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Time is a river, a violent current of events glimpsed once and carried away. We cannot grab it. We cannot control it. We cannot stop it, but we can flow with it." Seneca urged his students not to rush through life, not to live as if tomorrow were guaranteed. Timing in their philosophy was not about passively waiting for fate, but about understanding that every moment has its place. Forcing what is not yet ready only leads to frustration and mental clutter. Look at your own life, and notice how often overthinking comes from trying to rush the process. You want certainty in a relationship before it has had time to grow. You want mastery of a skill before you've put in the years of practice. You want success in your work without enduring the season of obscurity that shapes resilience. In all these cases, impatience leads to restless thoughts, endless doubt, and unnecessary suffering. Musashi's wisdom cuts through this. Trust the timing. The mountain cannot be climbed in a single leap. The summit will not come faster by obsessing over it. All you can do is walk your path steadily, knowing that when the right moment appears, you will be prepared to seize it. Consider how this plays out in training. Musashi trained endlessly, repeating the same movements, building discipline until his body and mind were one. He did not demand mastery in a day. He respected that skill matures with time. The discipline deepens through repetition. In the same way, whatever battle you face, whether it is building a business, healing from pain, or mastering yourself, requires patience. You cannot force the fruit to ripen before its season. If you do, it will taste bitter. The wise understand that timing governs all things, and their peace comes from aligning with it instead of resisting it. This teaching also relieves us of much unnecessary stress. Overthinking asks, why isn't this happening yet? What if it never happens? What if I'm too late? But Musashi's principle whispers, everything has its timing. Your task is not to obsess over when. It is to keep preparing, to keep showing up, so that when the moment arrives, hesitation does not rob you of it. Think of an archer. If he releases the arrow too early, it falls short. Too late, and the target moves. The discipline is not only in aiming, but in waiting for the right instant to release. Your life is the same. So how do you practice this? First, by slowing down. When your mind spirals into impatience, remind yourself not everything is meant to happen today. Second, by focusing on preparation. Instead of demanding results, ask, am I training? Am I building discipline? Am I ready for the moment when it comes? Third, by trusting rhythm. Notice how nature never hurries, yet everything is accomplished. Seasons change. Rivers carve valleys. Trees grow tall. All in their time. Overthinking cannot change the seasons. It can only rob you of peace while you wait. The genius of Musashi's strategy is that it transforms waiting from suffering into training. If there is timing in everything, then every moment before the outcome is not wasted. It is practice. Impatience turns the waiting into torment. Wisdom turns the waiting into preparation. And once you learn to trust timing, overthinking begins to lose its grip because you no longer demand answers before they are ready. You are content to prepare, to watch, to act when the opening reveals itself. So ask yourself now, where in your life are you trying to force timing? Where are you demanding results that cannot yet arrive? And how much mental noise would vanish if you accepted that timing is not your enemy, but your ally? To live by Musashi's principle is to quiet the storm of impatience and to find peace in the rhythm of growth. When you align with timing, the mind stops spinning and clarity begins. 6. Do not let the body be dragged by the mind, nor the mind by the body. Overthinking often feels like being pulled in two directions at once. Your mind races ahead, worrying about the future, replaying the past, imagining 1,000 outcomes. Meanwhile, your body sits still, tense, restless, drained by thoughts it cannot act upon. Or sometimes it's the opposite. Your body craves comfort, indulgence, or distraction, while your mind knows you should stay disciplined, study, or work. In both cases, there is a split, a war between mind and body. Musashi's wisdom, do not let the body be dragged by the mind, nor the mind by the body, is a call for balance, because when either dominates, chaos follows. But when they move in harmony, overthinking dissolves into focus and clarity. Think about how often your mind drags your body. You lie in bed exhausted, but your thoughts will not stop. They replay conversations, worry about tomorrow, or spiral into endless what-ifs. Your body needs rest, but your mind refuses to let go. The result, insomnia, fatigue, and an anxious fog that carries into the next day. On the other side, consider how often the body drags the mind. You sit down to work, but your body craves snacks, comfort, or the couch. Instead of focusing, you drift into procrastination, letting the body's desires dictate your actions. In both cases, imbalance feeds overthinking. The body grows restless when it is ignored, and the mind grows noisy when it is undisciplined. Musashi understood that a warrior cannot afford this division. Mind and body must be trained together like two swords wielded in harmony. The Stoics echoed this wisdom in their own way. Epictetus reminded his students that the body is temporary, subject to illness and weakness, but the mind is free if disciplined. Yet the Stoics also practiced physical training, cold exposure, and hardship, knowing that neglecting the body weakens the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote of keeping both strong, tending to reason but also to health. Musashi's teaching aligns perfectly with this. When body and mind are aligned, you are unshakable. When they fight each other, you are restless, anxious, and vulnerable to overthinking. Consider how athletes experience this. A runner who overthinks every step, calculating pace, fearing failure, doubting stamina, tires quickly, not from the body's limits but from the mind's chatter. But a runner who lets the body's rhythm and the mind's focus align enters what psychologists call flow, a state of effortless concentration. Musashi trained to live in this flow. His swordsmanship was not a mind commanding the body like a slave. It was body and mind moving as one, each enhancing the other. The same principle applies to you. When you eat well, sleep enough, and move your body, your mind clears. When you discipline your thoughts, your body follows with resilience. Balance quiets the storm of overthinking. Modern life makes this harder. We live in a world of imbalance. We sit for hours numbing the body while the mind spins, or we indulge the body endlessly with comfort, food, entertainment, pleasure, while starving the mind of discipline. No wonder anxiety and overthinking flourish. Musashi's lesson is not abstract philosophy. It is a practical cure. If your mind is restless, move your body. Go for a walk, train, breathe deeply. If your body is undisciplined, strengthen your mind. Set limits, focus, direct your attention with intention. Each balances the other. Overthinking often arises because we try to solve mental storms with more thought. But sometimes the cure is physical movement, exercise, grounding yourself in the present moment through your body. Other times restlessness comes from giving the body everything it craves, leaving the mind weak and undisciplined. Musashi's genius was to recognize both dangers and to seek balance. He was not just a swordsman of technique, but of harmony. He knew that victory required both clarity of thought and strength of body, working together as one. Practical application is simple yet powerful. Next time your mind drags your body into anxiety when you can't sleep or focus, breathe slowly, move your body. Bring yourself back to the present moment. Feel the ground under your feet. Let the body anchor the mind. And next time your body drags your mind into laziness, when you want comfort instead of discipline, speak to yourself firmly. Direct your attention. Remind yourself of your purpose. Let the mind lead the body. Balance is not found once. It is trained daily through awareness and practice. So ask yourself, am I letting my mind drag my body into exhaustion or my body drag my mind into weakness? Where is the imbalance? And what would happen if I brought them back into alignment? The answer is not just less overthinking. It is freedom. When body and mind are united, hesitation disappears. You act with clarity. You rest with peace. You live with strength. Musashi's principle is not just for warriors. It is for anyone who wants to end the war within themselves. 7. The way is in training. Overthinking convinces you that you must have everything figured out before you act. It tells you that you need the perfect plan, the perfect confidence, the perfect certainty before you take a single step. But Musashi's lesson, the way is in training, shatters this illusion. He reminds us that clarity is not born in thought, it is born in practice. You do not become confident by thinking about confidence. You do not become skilled by imagining yourself skilled. You become both by showing up, training, failing, and training. Again, overthinking is the enemy of training because it keeps you paralyzed in theory, while training dissolves overthinking by grounding you in action. Musashi knew this truth from the life he lived. He fought over 60 duels, many against seasoned warriors, and remained undefeated. Was it because he fought longer and harder than his opponents? It was because he trained relentlessly. His sword was an extension of his body an extension of his mind. And this harmony came not from overthinking, but from repetition. He practiced until clarity was instinct, until decision-making became natural. In training, the mind becomes disciplined. In discipline, overthinking finds no foothold. Musashi's genius was not mystical insight. It was devotion to practice. Modern psychology echoes this wisdom. Consider the concept of flow, that state where thought and action merge, where the chatter of the mind disappears and you are simply absorbed in what you are doing. Flow is not achieved by overthinking. It is achieved by training. A musician doesn't reach mastery by endlessly theorizing about scales. They reach it by playing, failing, adjusting, and playing again. A writer doesn't overcome doubt by analyzing their fears forever. They overcome it by writing every day, even when imperfect. In training, fear fades because action leaves no room for endless speculation. The Stoics understood this too. Epictetus told his students not to speak endlessly about philosophy, but to live it, to practice it daily. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that philosophy was not words on a page, but exercises in living. Musashi's teaching aligns perfectly. The way the path to mastery, clarity, peace is not found in imagining but in practicing. Overthinking asks, am I ready? Training answers, you will become ready through doing. Think of the areas in your life where overthinking keeps you stuck. You want to start a business but spend months debating ideas instead of testing them. You want to get fit, but waste time comparing workout plans instead of moving your body. You want to speak up in meetings but rehearse lines endlessly instead of just speaking. In each case, overthinking creates paralysis. But if you embraced Musashi's principle, you would begin training immediately. You would test, act, adjust, repeat. Progress would replace paralysis and confidence would replace fear. Training also teaches patience. Overthinking demands instant certainty, instant results. Training humbles you. It shows you that growth is built day by day, repetition by repetition. You cannot master a skill in one leap, but through steady practice, mastery becomes inevitable. Overthinking says, what if I fail? Training says, fail and learn and grow. Overthinking sees failure as proof you should quit. Training sees failure as part of the path. Musashi's way transforms failure into fuel, uncertainty into discipline, fear into focus. There is also freedom in this mindset. When you commit to training, you no longer need to predict the future. You don't need to know where every path leads. You only need to show up today and practice. The weight of needing all the answers lifts. Life becomes about the process, not the outcome. Musashi didn't step into each duel knowing with certainty how it would unfold. He stepped in knowing he had trained, that his practice had prepared him, and that whatever came he would respond. That confidence was not built in thought. It was built in sweat, discipline, and repetition. So how can you apply this? Start by identifying one area of life where you've been stuck in thought instead of action, then strip it down to a small daily practice. If you want to write a book, write 1 page a day. If you want to learn a language, study 15 minutes daily. If you want to build strength, train your body consistently, even if imperfectly. The secret is consistency. Overthinking thrives in the gap between thought and action. Training closes that gap. Each day of training is a strike against overthinking. Each repetition sharpens not just your skill, but your mind. The way is in training is Musashi's reminder that mastery is not a secret waiting to be discovered. It is a habit waiting to be lived. Overthinking will always whisper excuses. You're not ready. You don't know enough. Wait until you're certain. But certainty never comes before training. It comes because of training. Every time you choose practice over paralysis, you silence those whispers a little more until one day the noise is gone. And what remains is clarity, confidence, and the quiet strength of someone who lives the way, not just thinks about it. So ask yourself, what am I waiting to start because I'm still overthinking? And what would change if I replaced thinking with training today? Musashi's path is not theory. It is practice. And if you walk it, you'll discover that the cure for overthinking is not in finding the perfect plan, but in committing to the discipline of daily training. 8. Accept death without fear. At first, this principle may sound distant, even morbid. Accept death without fear. What does death have to do with overthinking? But Musashi's wisdom here is not about obsessing over the end of life. It is about freedom. Fear of death in its many subtle forms lies at the root of hesitation, paralysis, and endless mental chatter. Overthinking thrives because deep down we fear loss. We fear rejection, failure, humiliation, endings. Every moment of hesitation is the shadow of death in disguise. The fear that if we act, something in us will die. An image, an illusion, a dream, or perhaps the comfort of certainty. Musashi teaches us that when you accept death without fear, all of this hesitation loses its grip. Suddenly you are free to act, to live, to move forward without carrying the weight of constant mental resistance. Consider how overthinking operates in daily life. You want to speak up in a meeting, but your mind races? What if I sound stupid? What if they laugh? What if I ruin my reputation? Beneath these thoughts is the fear of social death, the loss of respect, the loss of belonging. Or you want to pursue a passion project, but your mind says, what if I fail? What if I waste years? What if I regret it? Here lies the fear of dream death, the possibility that your vision will collapse. In both cases, the chatter is not about logic. It is about fear. And until you confront this fear directly, overthinking will always find fuel. Musashi's way cuts at the root. Embrace death in all its forms, and fear has nothing left to feed on. The Stoics lived by the same principle. They practiced memento mori, remembering death not as a gloomy ritual but as a way to sharpen life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." When you accept death, you stop wasting time in hesitation. You stop drowning in what-ifs. You act with urgency and clarity because you know the clock is ticking. Overthinking dissolves when life is no longer about protecting every fragile outcome, but about living fully in the time you have. Musashi himself embodied this. In duels, he faced the possibility of death every time. If fear had controlled him, he would have hesitated, overthought, and lost. Instead, he trained his mind to see death not as an enemy, but as a natural possibility. By accepting it, he removed its power to paralyze him. In the same way, you may not face swords, but you face decisions every day where fear of endings keeps you stuck. Fear of the relationship ending makes you cling and overanalyze. Fear of failing keeps you from starting. Fear of rejection makes you rehearse words endlessly instead of speaking them. But when you accept that endings are part of life, you find freedom. You can let go, take risks, and live with courage. Think of it this way. What would you do differently if you knew your time was limited? You wouldn't waste hours replaying old conversations. You wouldn't spend years stuck in jobs you hate, relationships that drain you, or dreams you never dare to pursue. Overthinking thrives when you believe you have infinite time. Acceptance of death brings urgency. It whispers and stop waiting. Stop rehearsing. Stop circling endlessly in thought. Act now while you can. There is also a paradox here. The more you accept death, the more alive you feel. Why? Because fear no longer drains your energy. You become bolder, calmer, more decisive. A person who fears nothing, not even death, is impossible to control. They do not chase validation because they know approval can be taken away. They do not cling to possessions because they know possessions do not outlast them. They do not drown in overthinking because they have already made peace with the worst outcome. Freedom lies here. Musashi's genius was not in denying mortality, but in transforming it into strength. In practical terms, how do you apply this? Begin with small acts of courage. Speak up when you normally stay silent. Take a risk where fear tells you to wait. Each time you do, you are symbolically dying to fear and being reborn into freedom. Practice momento mori. Remind yourself daily time is limited. Not to depress yourself, but to cut through hesitation. The next time you catch yourself lost in overthinking, ask, if I had only a year left, would this thought matter? If I had only a day left, would I hesitate this much? The answers are almost always clear. Death clarifies what life obscures. So much of overthinking comes from pretending life is endless, as if you can afford to waste your days in hesitation. Musashi's principle is a call to wake up, to remember that time is short, to realize that fear is useless when the end is inevitable. And once you accept that truth, you are liberated to live with clarity, courage, and simplicity. So ask yourself, what fear is holding me back that would vanish if I truly accepted my mortality? What risk, what action, what decision would I take if I stopped clinging to illusions of safety and permanence? Because the moment you accept death without fear is the moment you begin to live without limits. 9. Detach from desire. Overthinking thrives on desire. You want something so badly. Success, approval, love, recognition that your mind cannot stop circling around it. You imagine every possible path toward it, every possible obstacle that could block it, every possible outcome if you win it or lose it. Desire fuels attachment, and attachment fuels noise. Musashi's teaching detach from desire is not about rejecting life's joys or living without goals. It is about loosening the grip of desire so it no longer chains your mind to endless speculation. The more desperately you cling to outcomes, the more restless your thoughts become. But when you let go, when you desire with balance instead of obsession, clarity returns and overthinking loses its grip. Think about how often desire pulls you into overthinking. You want a promotion at work, so your mind spins. What if my boss doesn't notice me? What if I fail this project? What if someone else gets ahead of me? You want someone to like you, so you analyze every word they said, every message they sent, every silence in between. You want financial success, so you spend hours imagining scenarios, profits, losses, risks, regrets, while never taking real action. In each case, the root problem is not the goal itself. It is the attachment. The tighter you hold, the louder the noise becomes. Desire chained to attachment is a breeding ground for overthinking. Musashi understood this well. As a samurai, desire could cloud judgment in battle. If you desired victory too desperately, you might overreach, make a reckless move, or hesitate in fear of losing. The true warrior, he believed, fought with clarity by detaching from the outcome. Victory was the goal, yes, but obsession with victory was weakness. Freedom was found in being present, focused on the next move, unchained from fear of loss. In life, the same principle applies. When you detach from desire, you still pursue goals, but you are no longer enslaved by them. You act with discipline, not desperation. Philosophy echoes this across centuries. The Stoics warned against attachment to external things, wealth, fame, approval, because they are outside our control. Epictetus said, "Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire but by eliminating it." The Buddha taught the same in a different tradition, that suffering is born from attachment to desire. Musashi, though a warrior, spoke the same language of wisdom. Detachment is not indifference, it is liberation. When you release the need to control outcomes, you quiet the storm of overthinking and act from strength. Consider a practical example. Imagine you are preparing for a big presentation. If you are consumed by desire for approval, I must impress them. I cannot fail. Your mind will rehearse endlessly, worrying over every detail, doubting every slide. But if you detach from desire, your focus shifts. You prepare with discipline, but you release the outcome. You remind yourself, I cannot control their reaction. I can only control my preparation, my delivery, my effort. Suddenly the noise begins to fade. Anxiety lessens. Clarity grows. The result is often better. Not because you cared less, but because you were free to give your best without being strangled by attachment. Detachment also changes how you see failure. When you are consumed by desire, failure feels like death. It shatters you, leaves you spiraling in endless what-ifs. But when you are detached, failure becomes information, feedback, part of the process. You adjust and continue rather than drown in regret. Overthinking thrives when failure is unbearable. Detachment makes failure survivable, even useful. Musashi knew that no battle was guaranteed, but every battle was a lesson. That is how he became undefeated. Not because he never risked, but because he never allowed desire to paralyze him. This principle also frees relationships. Desire for control, for constant reassurance, for perfection in others leads to endless mental spirals. Do they still love me? What if they change? What if I lose them? But when you detach, you can love more freely. You understand that people cannot be owned. That connection cannot be forced. You enjoy what is present without obsessively clinging to what may or may not remain. Overthinking in love is the product of attachment. Peace in love is the fruit of detachment. The beauty of Musashi's wisdom is that detachment does not kill passion, it purifies it. When you detach from desire, you stop chasing shadows. You act with intention, not desperation. You pursue your goals with calm steadiness, not frantic obsession. You live fully but lightly, carrying your ambitions like a sword, ready to wield but never clutched with fear. So how do you practice this? Start by noticing when desire turns into noise. Ask yourself, am I thinking about this because I need to act or because I am clinging? If it is clinging, breathe and release. Remind yourself of what you can control. Your actions, your choices, your discipline, and let go of the rest. Train yourself to enjoy the process, not just the outcome. And most importantly, remind yourself that nothing external defines your worth. Detachment is not about wanting less. It is about being free whether you achieve the outcome or not. So ask yourself now, what desire is chaining my mind into overthinking? What goal, what outcome, what attachment do I cling to so tightly that it drains my peace? And what would change if I pursued it with discipline but without obsession? The moment you detach, you discover that peace was never in getting what you wanted. It was in freeing yourself from needing it so desperately. 10. See things as they really are. Overthinking thrives on illusions. The mind takes a small problem and magnifies it, building scenarios on top of scenarios, layering fear upon uncertainty until reality itself is distorted. You receive a short message that feels distant and suddenly you imagine the relationship collapsing. You make one mistake at work and your mind spins stories about losing your job, your reputation, your future. In truth, the event is small, but your interpretation makes it massive. Musashi's lesson, see things as they really are, is a strike at the heart of this tendency. It is about stripping away exaggeration, wishful thinking, denial, and fear, so that what remains is reality. Nothing more, nothing less. When you see clearly, overthinking withers because it can no longer build its castles on illusions. Musashi was a master of clarity. In battle, illusions could kill. If you imagined your opponent was stronger than he was, fear would paralyze you. If you underestimated him, arrogance would blind you. Victory depended on seeing exactly what was in front of you, neither more nor less. In life, the same principle applies. Most of our suffering does not come from what happens, but from the distorted stories we tell ourselves about what happens. To see things as they are is to reclaim your mind from these distortions, to silence the noise of unnecessary thought, and to face life with calm eyes. The Stoics echoed this truth endlessly. Marcus Aurelius advised himself, You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Epictetus taught that things are not disturbing in themselves, but the judgments we attach to them disturb us. Both teachings align perfectly with Musashi's. Reality itself is neutral. It is our illusions, our exaggerations, denials, and fears that make it unbearable. When you learn to see things as they are without decoration or distortion, clarity emerges and overthinking fades. Think of how this plays out in daily life. You face a challenge, a delayed project, a financial setback, an argument with someone you love. Overthinking exaggerates. This means everything is ruined. I will never recover. This proves I'm a failure. But if you pause, strip away the illusions, and ask what is really happening here, the picture changes. The project is delayed, not destroyed. The financial setback is temporary, not the end of your future. The argument is painful, but not proof of the relationship's collapse. Reality is often far lighter than the illusions we add to it. Overthinking thrives on drama. Clarity thrives on truth. Illusions also work in the opposite direction. Through denial, sometimes we avoid painful truths by telling ourselves comfortable lies. We convince ourselves that the unhealthy relationship will magically improve, that the toxic habit isn't really hurting us, that we still have time to chase our dreams when deep down we know we are wasting it. Overthinking thrives here too because denial never silences the truth. It only buries it where it ignores at us quietly. Musashi's wisdom cuts both ways. See clearly not only the fears you exaggerate but the truths you avoid. The warrior cannot afford to fight a battle that isn't real, nor to ignore the battle that is. Practical application begins with the discipline of questioning your thoughts. The next time your mind spirals, ask, am I seeing reality or my interpretation of it? What evidence do I actually have? What story am I adding to this event? Often you will discover that 90% of your suffering is the story, not the fact. By stripping away the story, you reduce the noise. This practice takes courage because it forces you to face what is true without the protection of illusions. But it also brings peace, because truth, no matter how hard, is always lighter than lies. Musashi trained his students to perceive clearly by stripping away distraction. For him, every movement in combat had to be observed without bias, no underestimation, no exaggeration, no wishful thinking. Life requires the same. Clarity is not the absence of problems, but the absence of illusion. Once you see clearly, problems become solvable, fears become manageable, and overthinking has no fertile soil in which to grow. There is freedom in this clarity. When you see things as they really are, you no longer waste energy on phantom battles. You no longer fear shadows. You no longer cling to illusions that drain you. Overthinking becomes unnecessary because reality as it is enough. Sometimes hard, sometimes painful, sometimes beautiful, but always clear. So ask yourself now, what illusions am I clinging to? What fears have I exaggerated into monsters larger than they are? What truths am I avoiding, even though they are quietly demanding to be faced? The moment you answer honestly, the fog begins to lift. Musashi's wisdom invites you to put down the weight of illusion and pick up the clarity of reality. And once you see life as it really is, overthinking has nothing left to feed on. 11. Keep your mind fluid like water. Overthinking is rigidity in disguise. It is the mind refusing to let go, clinging to control, insisting that things must unfold in one specific way. When life shifts, when uncertainty appears, when plans collapse, the rigid mind panics. It analyzes, reanalyzes, spirals. Musashi's teaching, keep your mind fluid like water, is the cure. Water does not resist, it flows. It takes the shape of whatever contains it. It adapts to obstacles by moving around them, never losing its essence, never breaking. A fluid mind is not weak. It is unbreakable precisely because it does not cling. When you cultivate this flexibility, overthinking fades because instead of fighting reality, you move with it. Consider how overthinking always wants certainty. You plan your career path step by step, and when one step doesn't go as planned, your mind spins. What now? Did I fail? Should I start over? Or you invest your heart in a relationship, and when conflict arises, your mind races. Is this the end? Did I make a mistake? What if it all collapses? The rigid mind demands that the path stay smooth, but life never promises smoothness. The water-like mind, on the other hand, flows with the change. It says, this is not what I expected, but I will adapt. This is not the path I planned, but I can find another way. Flexibility silences the spiral of thought because it removes the illusion of control. Musashi knew this well in combat. A rigid fighter who insists on one technique becomes predictable and vulnerable. But a fighter who is fluid, who adapts to the opponent's rhythm, who shifts stances and strikes with flexibility, cannot be cornered. His survival lies in his adaptability. In life, the same is true. Overthinking locks you into rigidity. You demand certainty before you act. You demand control before you risk. But life is closer to a duel than to a script. It changes moment to moment. The fluid mind accepts this and stays ready. The Stoics also saw wisdom in this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that life is more like wrestling than dancing. You must be ready to respond, to adjust, to shift with whatever comes. Epictetus taught that you cannot control external events, only your response. Both ideas echo Musashi's water-like mind. Flexibility is strength. Rigidity is fragility. Overthinking is the mind's attempt to build rigid certainty where none exists. The cure is to flow. Look at practical life. Imagine you lose a job. The rigid mind panics. My future is ruined. I have failed. I don't know what to do. Weeks are spent in overthinking, fear multiplying. But the fluid mind asks, what new opportunities does this open? What can I learn here? How can I adapt? Instead of drowning in endless thoughts, the water-like mind moves forward. Or imagine you set a goal, but life throws obstacles in your way. The rigid mind says, it's impossible now. I failed. The fluid mind says, this path is blocked. I will find another. Water never stops moving. Neither should you. Flexibility also applies to the inner world. Overthinking thrives when you cling to fixed stories about yourself. I am not good enough. I always fail. I am this kind of person and I cannot change. These rigid beliefs trap you in spirals of doubt. But when you adopt a fluid mind, you remind yourself, I am not fixed. I can change. I can adapt. I am still flowing, still becoming. Overthinking loses power when identity itself becomes flexible. You are not chained to yesterday. You are flowing toward tomorrow. Musashi's wisdom is not permission to drift aimlessly. Water flows, yes, but it flows with force, carving valleys, shaping mountains, wearing down stone. Flexibility is not weakness. It is unstoppable strength. When your mind becomes like water, you do not give up on goals. You pursue them with persistence, but without rigidity. You adjust, you adapt, you continue. Overthinking dies because you no longer waste energy resisting what is. You move with reality, not against it. So how do you practice this? Begin by catching rigidity in your thoughts. Notice when you insist it must happen this way. I cannot accept any other outcome. Ask yourself, is this true or can I adapt? Train yourself to shift perspective. If one path is blocked, search for another. If plans fail, focus on what remains in your control. And remind yourself daily, you are not stone, you are water. Life will bend you, but it cannot break you if you stay fluid. So ask yourself now, where am I being rigid, demanding certainty, resisting change? And what would happen if instead of resisting, I flowed like water around the obstacle? Musashi's wisdom is not abstract poetry. It is survival. In combat, rigidity is death. In life, rigidity is overthinking, anxiety, paralysis. But a fluid mind is free, calm, unstoppable. When you learn to flow, you stop drowning in thought and start moving with clarity. 12. Live with a clear purpose. At the root of most overthinking lies one thing: confusion about purpose. When you don't know why you are doing something, every decision feels overwhelming. Should I go this way or that way? Should I choose this career or that one?
Should I stay in this relationship or leave?
Without a strong sense of purpose, the mind drowns in endless questions because it has no compass to guide it. Musashi's final teaching, live with a clear purpose, is the blade that cuts through this fog. A person with a clear why does not waste energy debating trivial details. They know where they are headed, and so their choices, even difficult ones, become simpler. Purpose doesn't remove uncertainty, but it silences the noise that comes from being directionless. Think about how overthinking multiplies when you lack purpose. If you don't know your larger goal, then every small step feels monumental. Choosing a job becomes terrifying because you don't know what you're working toward. Every relationship decision feels like a gamble because you don't know what kind of life you want to build. Every obstacle feels devastating because you don't know what it's serving. Without purpose, the mind fixates on the small because it cannot see the big picture. It tries to control every detail because it has no clarity on the destination. With purpose, however, details fall into place. The mind doesn't need to obsess over every step because it knows the mountain it is climbing. Musashi's life was a reflection of this. His purpose was mastery of the sword of discipline of himself. That clarity allowed him to endure hardship, to live with simplicity, to train without distraction. He did not waste time chasing pleasures or diversions that did not serve his purpose. Everything was filtered through a single question: does this serve the way? If yes, he pursued it relentlessly. If not, he discarded it. That is why his mind was sharp, his actions decisive, his victories consistent. His clarity of purpose left no room for wasted thought. Philosophers and thinkers across time have echoed this truth. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the concentration camps, confirmed it centuries later. When a person has meaning, they can endure suffering that would otherwise crush them. The Stoics taught the same. Epictetus told his students to align life with virtue, because without a guiding principle, the mind wanders into chaos. Musashi's principle is the same in different words. Purpose is the anchor that steadies the mind. Without it, you are at the mercy of every storm of thought. Consider a practical example. Imagine you want to start a business. If your only purpose is "I want money," then every obstacle will make you panic. A slow month feels like disaster. Criticism feels unbearable. Competition feels threatening. But if your purpose is clear, "I want to create something valuable to serve to build freedom for myself and others," then these obstacles become challenges to adapt to, not reasons to quit. Overthinking fades because your actions are anchored in a bigger why. Or think of relationships. If your purpose is clear, "I want a partnership built on respect, growth, and shared values," then decisions become easier. You no longer waste months overanalyzing whether someone who doesn't share your values is the one. Clarity cuts through noise. Living with purpose also protects you from the trap of distractions. Overthinking often thrives on meaningless pursuits. What others think, what trend you should follow, whether you're missing out. But when you live with purpose, you are less concerned with these. A person climbing their mountain doesn't stop to compare themselves to every traveler on the path. They keep walking because they know where they're going. Musashi's genius was not just in his discipline, but in his refusal to be distracted. He had one aim and everything else was secondary. That is why he lived with such clarity and why his wisdom endures centuries later. How do you apply this? Start by asking yourself, what is my clear purpose right now? Not a vague hope like "I want to be happy," but something rooted, tangible, and guiding. Maybe it's "I want to live with integrity." Maybe it's "I want to grow stronger every day." Maybe it's "I want to use my gifts to help others." Whatever it is, let it be simple and strong. Then filter your choices through it. Ask, does this action serve my purpose or distract from it? Overthinking thrives on trivialities, but purpose simplifies them. If it serves your purpose, you act. If it does not, you discard it. Simplicity replaces noise. There is also peace in this. When you live with purpose, you stop needing to control outcomes. You may not know exactly how the journey will unfold, but you know why you're on it. That why carries you through uncertainty. It anchors you when fear arises. It silences the voice of overthinking that demands certainty before you act. Purpose doesn't eliminate difficulty, but it makes difficulty bearable and often meaningful. So ask yourself now, what is the purpose that anchors my life? What is the why that makes my battles worth fighting? And what noise, what endless overthinking would vanish if I simply lived in alignment with it? Musashi's wisdom is timeless because it reminds us of the simplest truth. A clear purpose is the sharpest weapon against mental chaos. With it, you cut through distraction, hesitation, and doubt. Without it, you remain lost in the fog of thought. To live with a clear purpose is not only to end overthinking, it is to live with strength, with clarity, and with freedom. Overthinking is one of the most common prisons of the modern mind. It drains energy, steals focus, and paralyzes action. But through Musashi's timeless wisdom, we've walked through 12 principles that show us another way. To perceive what cannot be seen is to confront your hidden fears instead of running from them. To realize there is more than one path to the top of the mountain is to release the illusion of perfection and keep climbing. To do nothing that is of no use is to cut away the clutter and reclaim your energy. To seek today's victory over yourself of yesterday is to stop comparing and start growing. To understand that there is timing in everything is to learn patience and trust life's rhythm. To balance body and mind is to end the inner war and find harmony. To embrace that the way is in training is to silence hesitation through discipline and practice. To accept death without fear is to free yourself from the paralysis of clinging. To detach from desire is to stop drowning in noise and live with calm intention. To see things as they really are is to strip away illusions and face reality with clarity. To keep your mind fluid like water is to remain unbreakable through adaptability. And finally, to live with a clear purpose is to anchor your life with meaning so that every choice becomes simpler and every action more decisive. Musashi was not only undefeated in battle, he was undefeated in the greater battle of the mind. His wisdom is not for swordsmen alone. It is for anyone who wrestles with fear, doubt, and hesitation. His strategy was not about escaping life, but engaging it fully with clarity, with discipline, with courage. The cure for overthinking is not to think harder, but to live wiser. And these 12 principles give us the path. So now the challenge is yours. Where in your life are you trapped in thought instead of action? Which fear, desire, or illusion is holding you hostage? Which principle speaks to you most deeply? And how can you apply it today? Not tomorrow, not someday, but right now. The mountain is waiting. The summit is possible. The storm in your mind can be silenced, but only if you choose to live these truths, not just listen to them. Remember this. Freedom from overthinking is not about controlling every thought. It is about mastering yourself. And when you live with courage, clarity, and purpose, you are already walking Musashi's path.